This morning I am in Job 1, verses 2 and 3. Like I said, we're going to start slow. We'll pick up the pace a little bit, I think. Um, and what really jumps out at me today is the significance, maybe, of the way the details of Job's life are introduced. There's an order to it, and I wonder how much of that order really matters. The King James uses the word "his substance was," and that, I thought, wow, that's a pretty powerful way to look at things. But notice the order in which he is introduced to us. It starts with, he comes from the letter, he's in the land of Uz. So it starts with his heritage, he's in the land of opportunity. Things that are really kind of outside of his control are the very first things that are introduced about him. And then it talks about his character. And his character is upright, perfect, blameless, and God-centered. He feared God. And so then after you talk about that, it says he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. So we bring the family into it. And then after the family is when it talks about his economic situation or his impact in the world, in terms of the number of possessions that he had and servants, and which today might be, he was a big employer, and he was very successful in that way. And so I just thought about how different that is than how we introduce people today. I mean, today we're quick to go straight to meet Bob, he's a doctor, meet John, he's a lawyer, meet Sally, she's a teacher, meet Sophia, she's a scientist. I mean, we're quick to make the significance of a person and their introduction and how they, we present them to others, all about their profession. And I think that's, or maybe sometimes their significance to us. This is John, he's my daughter's coach, or this is Bobby, she's my son's teacher, that sort of thing. But it's always, pretty much what they do. And I thought about what it would look like if we were to really introduce or see people in the significance kind of formula that is followed in Job. And it might look something like, meet Dan. Dan is Caucasian, from New York, surrounded with wealth and an area of opportunity. He's kind and honest and compassionate. He loves the Lord. He's never rude. He refrains from hurtful behavior to others or insults about others. And he's amassed a lot of real estate and has many, many employees. He's a big employer in town. That would be maybe how we would do the introduction. And but we actually go out of our way to avoid some of those things. We don't want to talk about somebody's relationship with God as we're introducing them to people, unless maybe that's their profession. He's a pastor with a church with thousands of people, or I don't know. But I wonder what life might be like if we just kind of reordered some of that in our perceptions and introductions of others. And so, in that, there was something else that I wonder if it's as glaring to you as it was to me, and that is that there's no mention of Job's wife in that. We go straight from kind of where he's from, his background there, his relationship with God and his character, to his family that mentions his kids, and then to his kind of profession and possessions. So I prayed about that. I thought, well, is that because women don't matter? They don't think about that. They don't list them. They don't count in the Old Testament. And that was the first thing that came to mind. Sorry, but I know that's not the truth, because immediately the Spirit in me reminded me of Deborah, who was the leader of Israel. And we hardly even know her husband. There are lots of wives that are mentioned: Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Naomi, Ruth, and then we've got some that are even kind of scandalous. They're brought into it: the Tamar and Bathsheba. So there's definitely Old Testament recognition of women and their significance, and so that I decided couldn't be it, especially too because his daughters are mentioned right there. He had 3 daughters, so it didn't have anything to do with the insignificance of women. So then I thought about, maybe it is it's something else. And what came to mind is what I know about Job is that he is a man of character. And later we're going to read, and I'll fast forward a little bit and tell you this, but later we're going to read that he says he's made a covenant with his eyes not to look upon women lustfully. And he also leaves his daughters an inheritance like his sons. So he has an appreciation of women as equals even before it was culturally kind of accepted or required. So the lack of mention of his wife by Job could maybe be significant. A lot of people think Job wrote Job, which is why I'm kind of thinking, well, Job, why don't we mention your wife here? And then it occurred to me, maybe it's actually out of respect for his wife. Maybe it's out of respect for her privacy, because if you think about it, she was suffering, and the one thing we do see is that she was suffering so bad that she was ready to curse God and die, and so she was not coping as well, maybe, with the loss of everything, most significantly her children, as well maybe as Job. And maybe Job is, respecting her privacy and not making it necessary for her, her grief and her trauma and her response to all of that to be something that is displayed for the whole world and many generations to see. Maybe that's something to really appreciate about Job. I don't know, chokes me up. So I asked my husband, I said, why do you think Job doesn't mention his wife here, or his wife's not part of the introduction? And he said, maybe there was a distance between them. And that made me think about so many friends that I know that have lost children or lost a child, and how many of those marriages have failed. And my dad actually brought it up not too long ago, because you do see that. You see this horrible situation where maybe a child is diagnosed with cancer and they're in and out of the hospital and going through treatment, cancer treatments, or you have somebody maybe who has a mental health issue or a drug abuse diagnosis, and the husband and wife, they struggle together to keep it together, and then maybe the child dies and they end up divorcing or separating. And I thought about, sometimes that kind of trauma to a person and to a marriage where they're both losing something at the same time can really drive a wedge between people because they can't comfort each other. I mean, how do you grieve the loss of a child, and in Job's wife's case, children and everything, grieve that and deal with that hole and that that just horrible tragedy? How do you comfort somebody with something that you need? You need to be comforted. You kind of want your spouse to be there for you, to comfort you, to help you emotionally cope with and deal with this situation. And here you're both going through it at the same time. You can't bring comfort that you don't have. And so that's what occurred to me, is how maybe Job is just really respecting the fact that his wife is going through the same thing he's gone through, and she hasn't coped as well, and it's not her desire maybe to have all of her thoughts about God and the situation brought into the story. And so um, that's where I kind of ended this morning, and it made me, kind of the life impact that it had today was I really wanted to make sure that I have friends that if something were to happen to, me, that happened to my husband, or he couldn't be there to be my emotional, spiritual support, that I have a group of friends that could. And Job does. I don't know if Job's wife did or not. But I think, girlfriends, if you don't have those kind of friends, let's cultivate some of those relationships, because life can get hard, and I think we can't expect that our spouses are going to be able to meet all of our spiritual and emotional needs, especially if they're struggling as well, or going through something difficult. And the other thing is that, and guys, I say that for you too. All of us really need to have friends that will sit with us and be with us in grief when our spouses can't. And then the other thing that it made me think of was how I really want to look at those people that I know that are going through something difficult differently. Like, maybe I shouldn't say, oh, well, they have each other, because maybe they don't. Maybe they are in a place where they can't really help each other because they're both suffering, and they need friends. So my prayer this morning is for all of the Job wives out there, all of the people who have things that they're struggling with, that their spouse can't support them through because their spouse is really struggling at the same time. And I want to appreciate the fact that Job was such an honorable man towards women, which we're going to see later in our study, I think. And then finally, I want to leave you with this. What we're doing, I realized, is a thing. It's a thing. I didn't know it, but I said we're not going to study. It's more kind of just thinking about and sharing my thoughts. Guess what? My friend today said, well, what you're doing is called Lectio Divina. And I said, what? Lectio Divina? What is that? And so I looked it up, and oh my goodness, it's a thing. It's instead of studying the Bible, it's approaching the Bible prayerfully, meditating, praying again, being with that, and then contemplating how that affects you. And that's kind of letting the word reveal itself and letting it live in you. It's a thing. Monks used to do it. I had no idea, but I'm so excited that this isn't just, me being silly. I hope it's a blessing to you, and I hope that you'll do some of this yourself and see if it impacts you the way it's impacting me.